Getting in trouble for misgendering someone at drama club, an insane trans athlete horror story, and what to do when you have an unreasonably woke mother. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode, our Voicemail Friday episodes of the Barad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. But on Fridays, I take your voice notes and voicemails and hear about your woke horror stories, your personal life scenarios, and answer any questions you guys might have for me. Let's kick it off because we've got some real doozies to go through today, including up first a really bizarre story about somebody who got in trouble, or their friend got in trouble, for the horror of misgendering someone at high school drama club. Let's take a listen to this story.
Hi, Brad. My name's Millie. I go to school in Portland, or high school in Portland, Oregon, and I have some really good friends in the drama club. It's called Thespians. And my really good friend was telling me the tea on what was happening in the drama club, and apparently her and everyone else was trying to get my other friend kicked out of the club because he was making trans kids uncomfortable. And her exact words were, well, I know he's gay, but just because he has emotional trauma doesn't mean he can take it out on the trans kids. And I was thinking, like, oh, what is he doing? Is he like hurting them or something? But no, a few weeks later, I found out from my friend who actually did get kicked out, that he forgot to call some kids by their preferred pronouns. And he felt really bad about it, and he apologized to them. But yeah, he ended up getting kicked out. And I was like, oh, is this even legal? I didn't say this out loud, but I consider myself a reasonable person. I was like, he shouldn't have gotten kicked out, but I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Guys, sometimes when I hear your stories, I'm just so thankful that I am not a young person today because I would be so cooked. I would be so kicked out of every club, every group for saying something offensive or problematic. And then the craziest part of the story is that he apologized, and even that wasn't enough. They still kicked him out. I hate that so much. That's so unfair. I mean, of course, you should treat people with respect in the club that you're in, and that probably means avoiding misgendering them. I don't think you necessarily have to use the pronouns they want, but you should at least probably avoid using pronouns for them if you can, if you don't want to upset them. Like, there's clearly some respect and a balancing act that has to happen here, but the idea that you would kick somebody out of a club over that, even though they apologized, because he's making people feel unsafe or uncomfortable, is just so ridiculous. And I mean, you're really not teaching those kids who identify as trans the coping skills and social skills they will need in the real world, because in the real world people are not always going to use their preferred pronouns, and they need to be able to roll with the punches a little bit and keep it moving, not melt into a puddle and run and cry to a guidance counselor or whatever anytime somebody doesn't call them zer. And so I think you're actually kind of setting those kids up for failure by coddling them like this in a way that I think is counterproductive, in addition to being unfair to your friend who had this experience. But I can't say I'm shocked that the drama club has a bunch of woke drama going on. I mean, no, you're telling me the theater kids are dramatic and have all sorts of identities and pronouns? Wow, this is my shocked face. Gosh, I couldn't handle being a young person today. I would be too problematic. I'd get myself in all sorts of trouble, but maybe it would be interesting. Who knows? I'm sorry your friend had that experience. Low-key does sound illegal if you're at a public school in particular, so maybe that person should contact the FIRE or another free speech group to look into their case. I'm not sure you actually can kick someone out of a club for First Amendment protected speech at a public school, but I don't know the exact law or legality there. I would encourage you to explore the options, because they really shouldn't be allowed to do that. They shouldn't get away with that. It's not right. There's a way of encouraging students to be kind and respect each other and make everyone comfortable without like excommunicating people who misspeak, even if they apologize. That's really unfair and counterproductive. Like, do they think that's going to lead to this of course, it's a gay student, which I find hilarious, but this student becoming more tolerant towards trans people. If I was him, I'd be like pissed off and annoyed and more likely to become intolerant. They don't think through these things. They really don't. What do you guys think about this drama club drama? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you aren't yet. If you want to hear more of these woke horror stories, and remember the link to send in your woke horror story, your personal life situation, or your questions for me via voice note is in the description. And guys, we're going to cover and react to a trans athlete horror story, like one of the worst examples of this madness I've ever heard about. We're going to take a listen to that after this. Artificial intelligence is the future, and video editing is no different. Today's sponsor, Opus Clip, is a pioneer in this space and turns 2 years old this June. I first encountered Opus Clip as the coolest cutting-edge AI video clipping service, but it's evolved into much more than just that. Now, Opus Clip is the leading AI growth tool for creators. Opus Clip now helps creators save time and stay consistent by automating their entire short-form video workflow. With the new auto import feature, Opus Clip can automatically pull in your latest YouTube videos and instantly auto edit your videos into social ready clips. You can also select specific playlists for smarter import control. And coming soon, the auto scheduler will allow you to bulk select clips and schedule them for when you're out of the office or on vacation, so your content keeps going live. This makes it easier than ever to stay active across multiple platforms with little effort. You can try out Opus Clip and even participate in their Clip the Future contest over the next month and get free credits or potentially even win a MacBook Pro up to $5,000 cash or other awesome prizes. Head to www.opus.pro/clip-the-future now to check it out. Okay, guys, let's take a listen to this next voice note, which recounts one of the most horrifying examples of a trans athlete story that I've ever heard, which is saying something, because these stories tend to be kind of crazy, but this one really takes the cake. Let's take a listen now.
Hey Brad, I'm a big fan of the show and I wanted to call in to share my story with you as a female athlete and student. In high school, I was a leading player on my golf team, making varsity as a freshman. But then in my sophomore year, a biological male joined my team. He had bulging biceps bigger than my father's and could easily outdrive any of the female players, even on our best days, always ranking the highest out of all of us and qualifying for championships that could have otherwise gone to one of us. He also identified as gender fluid, using he, him, she, her, and they, them pronouns interchangeably. This meant that he was allowed to play on both the girls' and the boys' teams. But we were told that it was unacceptable to mention any contrary views to his participation on the women's team, and doing so would result in our removal. I'm now at a Christian college, and while being a full-time student at that 4-year university, I also took a bunch of community college courses during my breaks in order to graduate early. But when I bring up my high school golf team to those teachers, the reactions range from dismissive to horrified, and most of them forbid me to discuss it. I know the issue is starting to get better on a public scale, but as a student, I have trouble sharing my story without negative judgment from my teachers, especially when my grades are on the line. Anyways, thank you for taking the time to listen to my story, and I can't wait to hear your response.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing this story, and it's a doozy. I've heard a lot of these, but wow, that one really does take the cake. And I love how in your community college classes or your, higher education community, I'm sure the mantra is like, share your truth, queen. Yes, that's their lived experience. Oh, but not her. Her lived experience is problematic and offensive, so we can't have any of that around here. It really is funny how quickly that stuff seems to go out the window when it's an inconvenient truth or lived experience. Gosh, it makes me roll my eyes so hard I'd give myself a headache. The actual underlying story that you're telling here, on face value, though, is just diabolical. What do you mean? I mean, it would be bad enough if this student on your golf team was actually someone who identified as a trans girl and was transitioning and went by she, her. It would still be unfair in a sport that obviously there's huge biological differences to allow that person to compete in the women and girls sports division. I would think that's unfair, but competing in both? He, him, she, her, and they, them? Pick a struggle. What? How are you going to do all that at once? And if you're not even, if you go by he, him, and you're still competing in the male division and you're gender fluid, then it's not even true that you're like uncomfortable competing with the males or being called he. So why can't you just stick to that league then, Miss Gender Fluid? What? But seriously, this doesn't even make sense. There's not even the semblance of a justification that would exist in the case of an actual trans athlete who is actually, trying to be trans and live as trans. In this case, this person just wants to like own the competition and destroy the female. I mean, it's really horrible. That is horrible. That's really terrible and totally unfair. And shame on the adults around you that allowed that to happen because they're afraid of the backlash or they don't have a backbone or whatever it may be. Shame on them, honestly. The other thing I'll say here is it's really crazy to me that they were like shaming you for speaking up and having any different opinion on this. It, you're not crazy. Most people agree with you on that. And they're just scared of getting canceled or having activists yell at them or I don't know what, or they spend too much time on TikTok and their brain has been rotted because any person with an ounce of common sense, liberal, progressive, conservative, Republican, whatever, knows that that's not fair and knows that this situation in particular is totally incoherent and absurd. So I'm really sorry you had to go through that. If it's never been reported on, I mean, maybe you should contact a media outlet to get that story out there a little bit more because they say, oh, this almost never happens. And I agree, it's not like the most common thing in the world. There aren't a ton of trans athletes, but it does happen. And when it does, it's just really unfair. In particular, in this case with the gender queer thing, it's beyond parody at this point. But what do you guys think? Have you heard stories like this before? Let me know in the comments. Now, guys, we're going to hear from somebody who has a woke mom and doesn't know what to do about it. Let's take a listen to this next voicemail.
Hey, my name is Haley. Love your show, Brad. So I actually just had this conversation with my mom last night, so it's fresh in my head. Now, my mom is super loving and generous, but politically, we're on different pages. She openly calls herself woke, and she's been to some anti-Trump and Elon Musk protests. She does have a little bit of TDS, and I love her because she's so much more than those things. But anyway, yeah, we clash. And last night we were talking, and the SAVE Act was brought up, and she was like, "They're trying to take away women's right to vote." And I just had to stop her, and I was like, "Wait, what? That's not what this bill that really does." I'm not even sure I support the bill. There's stuff in there I have questions about, and I explained this to her. But saying it's an attack on women's voting rights is just, it's not entirely an honest interpretation of the bill. And she got upset with me. She called me naive, and it got tense. And I just realized we're living in totally different ecosystems, information wise. I later asked her what she thought of NPR and PBS, and she just talked them up and said how so essential and how unbiased these are. And it took me a second, and I realized I can't take her anger too personally because she's a little bit naive too. And that's okay. Maybe we can't talk about politics, but just wanted to see what you thought of that. It's not much of a horror story. Thanks.
No, it's not a horror story. It's a common experience that a lot of people have. And I do want to commend you for your ability to recognize that your mom, like every person, is a complicated human being with many dimensions and many layers. And just because she has rather silly politics doesn't make her a bad person, doesn't mean that she is irredeemable or adds no value to your life. Of course not. I'm sure she's a wonderful person in many ways. And kudos to you for being able to separate those two things. That said, some of this does sound really absurd. I mean, imagine in the year of our Lord, 2025, unironically calling yourself woke. I You barely even encounter that anymore. And then the SAVE Act, for folks that don't know, it's this legislation going through Congress that would affect women who've married, who are changing their voting registration or update. I did a whole episode about it. If you want to go in the back catalog, and there's all this panic about how they're going to take the right to vote away from women. They are not. That's not really it. I did do a deep dive on that people can check out if they're interested in the details. That said, if you would like to try to convince your mom, what I would recommend that the SAVE Act isn't what she thinks it is that you probably, if she literally is so woke to the point where she unironically calls herself woke in 2025, then sending her my video is not going to help. She's going to be like, look at this fascist, pick me gay, or whatever. So, what I would actually try to do is attempt to find a fact checker from a liberal source. So, maybe the Washington Post's fact checker, maybe Snopes, maybe PolitiFact, and see if they've done a fact check of the SAVE Act. Because sometimes, even though they are left leaning, they will do fact checks that undercut progressive narratives. We read one on the show, I think yesterday, actually, about the whole like dropping immigrants in the ocean thing. And if you could find her a source she trusts that undercuts this, maybe you could help her see the light. But the fact that she thinks NPR and PBS are unbiased is so funny to me. We really are living in different worlds, different ecosystems. And that's why you got to leave space and nuance for people having different perspectives. Because if all the information you consumed was NPR or whatever, you would also probably reach some of these conclusions just because your sense of what's going on would be so skewed. So I leave that space. What I'll say is that honestly, though, at some point, you might just have to agree to not talk about politics anymore with your mom and just focus on the good that's there. And that's okay. You know, the world is complicated. You're probably not going to change each other's minds. But all of it is beyond your control. Neither of you has any direct influence on national politics. So allowing it to tear apart your relationship or cause strain or arguments is just totally unproductive and kind of tragic. So hopefully you guys can maintain a positive relationship and avoid that pretty common pitfall that we see. But thank you for your voice note, for listening to the show, and for sharing your story. Next, we're going to hear from somebody whose maid of honor blocked her over politics. Yes, let's take a listen.
Hey Brad, this is Em. I wanted to tell you the true story of my maid of honor. So, whenever I got engaged this past summer, I knew right away who I wanted to ask. I asked my college roommate. She agreed, and it was very exciting. Her and I met at college in a random life sciences class. We became quick friends, and we stayed together throughout our entire college career, living together until I graduated. And during that life sciences class, the first couple of months of me knowing her, ironically, we were polled on who we had voted for. I had voted for Trump, and she had voted for Biden. Didn't make much of a difference to us since we had both actually were able to articulate our positions with each other and have very fruitful discussions and debates about different topics. I really appreciate the time that I have with her still. For that reason, she really brought in my perspective on some things. However, when Trump won this past election, she sent me a message advising me that she no longer felt safe associating with me, and she blocked me, ghosted me. My maid of honor ghosted me, which was really ironic because she knew my political position very early on in our friendship. Just thought I would tell the story. I hope you have a great one, everyone, and thank you.
Wow. Well, that's really sad. I'm really sorry that happened to you. I mean, that's kind of tragic. And it's all the more worse because like I don't know, I blame her for this. I do. I mean, obviously she's being intolerant and closed-minded, but at the same time she must be a victim of some serious brainwashing or propaganda to have gone through this kind of transformation because you haven't changed. She's changed, right? When you met her, you were a Trump voter. You could talk about it. You could civilly disagree. Funny how when her side was in power, right? When Biden was president, she could handle, disagreement. But then when they didn't win, suddenly, I feel unsafe affiliating with a Trump supporter. What a ridiculous thing to say because you're the same person you were all those years she associated with you, and she wasn't unsafe then, was she? So, no, it's a load of BS. It's a crock of BS. It's really close minded and intolerant. Um, and it's sad though, because this is somebody who you shared so many special memories with, who was so close to you, and it's a real loss. I guess I can only hope that sometimes people who go down that path do actually come out of it at some point. I have known people who've been so, brainwashed and kind of gone full NPC, and then they end up, something snaps or changes their perspective at some point. So maybe some point down the line there could be some reconciliation there, but this is really sad. And I'm really sorry this happened with you. Unfortunately, I hear from people all the time these kinds of stories, and it's really a sad state of affairs for our country where politics are just ripping up people's relationships like this. We've got to get away from it. I think it's one of the most harmful trends in our society, and it's such a common theme in the messages that you guys send in to me. Okay, guys, up next, we're going to listen to a voicemail asking for my gay dating advice. Let's take a listen to that.
Hey Brad, my name is Chris. I know this isn't exactly a political question, but I was hoping I could get your advice on dating as a conservative or right-leaning gay man. I'm 32 and I live in Utah. I tried dating when I was younger, but let's just say it didn't go very well. It left me with some pretty deep scars, and I'm only just now trying again after putting in a lot of work. I've never really felt welcome in traditional gay spaces due to being right-leaning. I've been told that I'm not gay enough when I've tried to connect in those circles. On top of that, not being welcome in those circles and being in a conservative state, I haven't really had friends since I was about 14, so I'm not exactly sure how to even begin putting myself out there again. I feel like I've got a lot of things working against me, like my age, politics, and to be blunt, my body image, because a few years ago, anxiety meds caused my weight to spike to nearly 300 pounds. I've since dropped to the 180s, but I'm left with stretch marks across my torso that make me extremely self conscious, especially with how vain the gay community seems to be. So I guess I'm just at a little bit of a loss here. How do you even begin to date or find a relationship when you feel like an outsider in your own community? Any advice would really mean a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so honest and open and vulnerable and sharing your story. Um, I have some advice. I have some thoughts, but there's also maybe a limit to how much I can help because the situation really is just tough. The situation can be bleak as a right leaning gay person. I had a horrible time dating in Washington, D.C. I've now been in a relationship for many years, and we kind of met by chance, really. But the the scene is bleak. It's probably a little better now than it was during like peak woke 2019, 2020. But the gay community is very political. They are very against, people with different perspectives in at least in large part in some pockets. I think one piece of advice that I would have is one, the easiest way to get out there is probably to start going on dating apps, just maybe I but I think one way to avoid this would be to the potential political issue would be to be upfront about it, first of all. So people, I mean, maybe even put it in your bio so people just swipe left on you and save you both the time if they're not open-minded. But another thing to do would be to specifically try to connect with like-minded people. There are a lot of right-leaning gay people. Now they're not always, concentrated in one place, but maybe you could meet somebody online from another part of the country and then have a long distance relationship, and at some point you move and you be with that person. I know a lot of people who've done that, and it's really more important to find somebody who connects with your values than it is to, find somebody super convenient to be in a relationship with down the street, at least in my view. You could also look into groups like Log Cabin or other groups for right leaning gay people and maybe start attending some events in your area to try to meet some of them. That might be a good option. And then, as far as your body image issues, I totally understand. First off, good for you for losing all that weight. That's really admirable. I know it's really tough and you did the right thing for yourself and your health, but of course when then you can be left with these like kind of loose skin and other issues, stretch marks and other things that kind of still are with you. You could look into a plastic surgery option for that to address it, if you have the resources to do so. I know that is an option potentially, but you also don't have to do that, and you can just hopefully maybe work on your sense of self and your self-esteem to the point where you can accept that as part of you. And yes, the gay community is very shallow and vain at times, but not everybody is. And also, not everybody is vain or shallow about the same thing. So you may well be able to find someone who doesn't really care about that. And it's more important to them that you have really nice teeth or that you're tall or something else where maybe you do have good things going for you. So please don't despair. Don't like say, oh, I'm undateable because of this. You are most certainly not. And I hope that you will find somebody. It probably won't be easy, but just put yourself out there, work on improving your own self esteem and coming to accept the things about yourself or change them if you can accept them. But I'm rooting for you, and rest assured that lots of people have gone through a similar struggle. And it's not impossible, but it's certainly not easy. Okay, up next, we're going to listen to a voicemail from somebody who wants my parenting advice, sort of. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Brad. I'm a 35-year-old woman, and me and my boyfriend have 2 young kids. I wanted to talk about my concerns for my children if they do not end up fitting their typical gender norms. I was a tomboy growing up and also obese, and had a lot of shame regarding my body. I remember often thinking it'd be easier to be a boy over a girl, as being fat as a boy seemed less shameful. At least that's how I perceived it back then. Then in my early teens, I became confused about my sexuality. I'm bisexual, and I also had mental health issues in my early teens. As I got to my mid teens, I lost the weight and slowly over time became more feminine and comfortable with my body. During my childhood, if someone had suggested to me before I was about the age of 15 or 16 that I was a boy, I would have jumped on that, thinking it would solve all my problems. All I could say is thank God I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. And that's what scares me, is if I was growing up in these days, I could definitely see myself going through that trans pipeline, and maybe I would have done something to my body that would not allow me to have my kids. And that's what scares me. Everyone's changing and growing so much during their teen years. I don't want someone suggesting to my kids if they don't fit the typical gender norms that they might be the opposite gender. If my kids got a true diagnosis of gender dysphoria, I would support them, but wouldn't want them to medically transition until they were 18 or legal adults. Just my thoughts and concerns of being a new mother in these days. Thank you. I hope you're having a good day. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. It's really interesting. And it's actually one I've heard from a lot of people. I've heard from a lot of people, especially people who are lesbian or bisexual, or maybe on not on the straight, heterotypical heterosexual orientation, but also people who are even that they were tomboys and that they were, drawn to like boy things as a young girl. And they worry that now, if they'd grown up today, they would have been transitioned. That's one of the problems with the guardrail free approach that's sometimes taken, or at least very minimal guardrails. And I can totally understand your concern for your kids growing up. I'm a little reticent to give much parenting advice, seeing as I don't have kids or any real knowledge or expertise in that, but I can talk a little bit about the gender aspect to it. And I think what's important is to know that, frankly, your kids probably will be exposed to this stuff at some point. So rather than try to avoid them learning what trans is so they don't get brainwashed or anything like that, you probably want to introduce the existence of this concept to them yourself at some point and explain to them, what it is and what it isn't, and that it's okay for them to be a boy and not necessarily like fishing and football and all these like stereotypically masculine things, or it's okay to be a girl and not care about makeup or dresses or any of these things. You kind of, I think, want to go there first rather than wait for them to, have some woke presentation at their public school or something and then come to you and you have to try to undo the terrible messaging they've been given. It's definitely better to get out of ahead of it at some point. So I would consider doing that. And then just being supportive of their differences and their personalities and not trying to force. I think one thing that sometimes conservative or Republican or even just, skeptical of woke parents might do that is counterproductive is being so worried, oh, I don't want my kid to be brainwashed into being non-binary or whatever, that they like over police their gender norms and stereotypes. Like, no, you can't play with those dolls, Billy. Like, that is actually counterproductive. One, because it's just kind of a closed-minded way to look at the world, a very old-fashioned way to look at the world. But two, also, it probably plays into the idea in their head that like, oh, well, I must not be a boy if I like these things or what have you. So there's also the problem with parenting and with kids, especially teenagers, that when you try too hard to push them against something or away from something or declare something totally off limits, that it creates this kind of allure of forbidden fruit or resistance. I swear if I have kids one day, they're all going to identify as non-binary just to trigger and troll me. And I worry about that. Although I guess what I would have to do, and if this did happen, is I'm not sure you can really like force them to out of it. You probably have to indulge it, but just gatekeep it, and I'll make them know you cannot make any permanent changes to your body. Sure, you can call yourself this, because if you tried to like stop them or put your foot down, it might backfire. So I would and make them dig in. I know some teenagers can be very stubborn like that. So I would keep all of that in mind. But frankly, it sounds like you have your head on straight, or your head on bisexual, and you're going to do a great job and be a great mom. So thanks for the message, and thank you all so much for tuning in to this Voicemail Friday episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. That'll be it for today. Hope you all have a wonderful 4th of July. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Hit that like button, send in your voice notes, yada, yada, yada. And with that, guys, we'll talk again real soon.